Two cousins reportedly with mob connections and three Teamsters Union members were arrested today on extortion charges. The alleged victim, show business. The five men were involved in two cases, first reported by NBC News. Here are two reports. The first from Brian Ross.
This is Lola Falana, on stage last year at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas.
Everywhere I look around.
A federal grand jury indictment unsealed today says a powerful East Coast Mafia family tried to cash in on the enormous earning power of Miss Falana and another big name in Las Vegas, singer Wayne Newton. Federal authorities say the mob tried to move in on Newton and Falana last year when Newton asked two Mafia figures to use their power and influence in the underworld to call off threats and demands made against Newton by other mobsters from New York. The mob's involvement with Wayne Newton and Lola Falana was uncovered in New Haven, Connecticut, when FBI agents in a routine gambling case began tapping the phones of the local Mafia boss, Frank Piccolo. Piccolo was charged today with extortion. Authorities say Piccolo agreed to take care of the mob's threats against Newton and Lola Falana's business manager, and that in return, Piccolo wanted a piece of the earnings of Newton and Falana and the proceeds of an insurance policy on Miss Falana. Also charged today with extortion, Guido the Bull Penosi, a convicted heroin dealer who was arrested by FBI agents at his home in Beverly Hills early this morning. Last September, under oath before the Nevada Gaming Board, Wayne Newton said he had no relationship with the mob or Guido Penosi. And Newton told NBC News he didn't know anyone named Frank Piccolo. But today's indictment indicates that Newton told a much different story to the federal grand jury. Authorities say Wayne Newton became a victim of the mob scheme, and that Newton will be a key government witness against the two Mafia figures he once went to for help. Brian Ross, NBC News.
Frank Louis Piccolo, also known as the Cigar, Frankie Cigars, Frank Lanza, and Bobby Brooks, was born on July 2, 1921 in New York City, reportedly in East Harlem's Italian section. At some point during the 1940s, he moved up to the state of Connecticut, where he would remain and operate for the rest of his life. He settled within Fairfield County, specifically the city of Bridgeport. After he got married, Piccolo purchased a modest home for his family at 188 Peace Street in Stratford. Many years later, Frank and his wife moved to a luxurious penthouse apartment atop the Inwood condominium complex at 3200 Park Avenue in Bridgeport. Sources say this complex was reportedly built on land in which Piccolo had, at one time, held ownership interest, which he later sold for a seven-figure profit. Frank was known as a very sharp dresser who enjoyed expensive clothes, the game of golf, and the finer things in life like top-notch restaurants and nightclub venues, and vacations to Las Vegas and Europe. He was also reported to be a devout family man who did his best to keep his wife and children shielded from his life in the underworld. Acquaintances of his once described him to local newspapers as a warm, personable guy with a fine sense of humor who smiled a lot and liked to tease people. His arrest record started back in 1947 and included such charges as illegal gambling, possession of policy slips, operating a numbers business, assault, failure to register as a convicted felon, possession of narcotics, and income tax evasion. As far back as the 1963 McClellan hearings, Piccolo had been labeled a mafia leader. By the early 1960s, the FBI had labeled him a highly placed racketeer in the Bridgeport, Connecticut area. As he rose in power and status through the years, law enforcement authorities said he regularly maintained contact with numerous top racketeers, including family boss Carlo Gambino, underboss Neil Delacroce, and such important fellow capos as John Angelone, Joe Arcuri, Mike Catalano, and Rocco Mazzi, to name but a few. Other close contacts included New England boss Raymond Patriarca and his underboss William the Wild Man Grasso, Connecticut-based Genovese soldiers like Vincent Polina and Salvatore Sabby Basso, and important mob associates like Genovese family mobsters Francis and Gus Curcio. He also reportedly maintained close friendships with mafiosi from his old East Harlem neighborhood like Lucchese Capo Anthony Tony Higgins Castaldi and soldier Paul Pauly Leg Zerbo, who were both suspected of being a source of narcotics supply for Piccolo and his men. It is believed that Piccolo originally came up under the guidance and tutelage of Bronx capo Arthur Chink Leo, who was his direct superior. He was also close to another old-timer named Ippolito Paul the Greaser Agresta. Although federal authorities listed Agresta as a soldier, nonetheless, he was a respected and pivotal figure within Connecticut's underworld for decades and a man that Piccolo was very close to. That is, of course, until Agresta disappeared in 1974 and was presumed murdered. In June 1962, the FBI found Piccolo's name and personal phone number among the personal effects of Carlo Gambino. His info had been handwritten on the back of a business card of the Consolidated Research and Manufacturing Corporation, located at 220 East 23rd Street in Manhattan. When later questioned by FBI agents, Piccolo admitted that he was affiliated with this company through a partner named Martin Botwick, who was listed as the company's president. Connecticut-based Gambino family soldiers said to be directly operating under the Piccolo regime included soldiers Paul Agresta, Dave Iacovetti, Thomas DeBrizzi, Anthony Megale, and Piccolo's cousin Guido Penosi, among many others. He also had a large crew of associates. Through the years, the New Haven office of the FBI was known to keep close tabs on Frank and members of his crew, and for a very good reason. Piccolo was believed to be the principal banker behind Bridgeport's largest numbers operation that handled action within the cities of Port Chester, Stamford, Norwalk, Fairfield, and New Haven. He also controlled a complimentary horse bookmaking business that grossed millions of dollars annually. He and his top aides also headed up a major Shylock operation. He acted as a behind-the-scenes financier, backing smaller loan sharks in the Bridgeport area. He was said to loan money to other sharks at an interest rate of 1 to 2% weekly. They, in turn, would re-lend those same funds out at 3 to 5% each week. It worked out quite nicely for everyone involved for many years, except, of course, for their loan customers. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics also strongly suspected Piccolo was engaged in the periodic smuggling of narcotics, specifically heroin, into the United States from overseas. The FBI reported that Piccolo and members of his crew primarily operated out of several key locations over the years. These included the Venice Athletic Club, which was known as a mob hangout and gambling den, and the Oakland Social Club, both located in Bridgeport, where a steady crap game was also run. The Piccolo crew also was known to utilize several popular Italian restaurants and watering holes in Bridgeport's Little Italy section. During the late 1950s to early 1960s, Frank listed his steady employment as a commissioned salesman for Perini and Troya Automobiles of Fairfield, which was a new and used car sales agency. He could also frequently be found at Columbia Motors, a used car lot that authorities said he had a financial interest in, as well as the Ocean Sea Grill and the Hotel Savoy, also located in Bridgeport. In 1980, secret FBI wiretaps led to the indictment of Piccolo and his cousin Guido the Bull Penosi on extortion charges for the attempted shakedown of world-famous singers Wayne Newton and Lola Falana. The two mafiosi had attempted to cash in after several threats to the entertainers were made by other mobsters, namely members of the Vito Genovese family. In a second follow-up indictment, which was also tied to those same FBI wiretaps, Piccolo and others were charged with interfering with a federal investigation into several illegal dice games then operating in Bridgeport. At the time of this probe, federal authorities said that aside from a 1970 income tax evasion charge for which he was later convicted, these indictments were the first felony charges lodged against Frank in the last 25 years. His legal troubles aside, admittedly, during those same years, Frank Piccolo was operating at the very top of his game. But as is the case in the underworld, sometimes success can be fleeting. One afternoon in 1981, Frank Piccolo was shot to death in broad daylight on Main Street in Bridgeport. His assassins had caught him by surprise, dead to rights as it were, while he was talking on a payphone on a public sidewalk. Newspapers reported that in the weeks leading up to his death, Piccolo became aware that the FBI had placed bugs inside his favorite restaurant, the Backstage, and had tapped his home telephone, so he decided to change up his routine. He started eating breakfast at the Bagel King on Main Street and had started making important phone calls from a bank of public payphones nearby. But unfortunately for him, Piccolo started adhering to his new routine just as firmly as he had his old one. In the early afternoon of September 19, 1981, Frank made his usual morning stop at the Bagel King, where he greeted several friends and then ordered a cup of coffee. Witnesses said he spent some time inside the coffee shop before walking across the street to a payphone. They said he was talking on the phone when a maroon-colored van pulled up. At that point, Frank hung up the phone and reportedly walked over to the van to talk to somebody inside when two masked men suddenly jumped out from a side panel door and shot him 3 times at close range with a high-powered carbine rifle. As the van sped away, several witnesses jumped into their cars and gave chase, with the police eventually joining in as well. The high-speed chase wound through 3 different towns before the van evaded police and disappeared. Police later claimed that Genovese mob associate Gus Curcio, who apparently wasn't wearing a mask, was in the driver's seat of the van, and that during the chase, the path the van had taken before police lost it had led to Curcio's property. In fact, police said the van slipped through an opening in a fence in Curcio's backyard, but police didn't pursue because they felt it was a trap. So after going through the fence, the van jumped back on the road, never to be seen again. Gus and his 2 brothers, Francis and Vincent, were known as major organized crime figures active in Bridgeport and in competition and at odds with Piccolo. Gus was later implicated and charged in Frank's murder. Cops even raided his home, hoping to find the murder weapon, but to no avail. And after 2 attempts to bring a grand jury indictment against him, and without any solid evidence, the state dropped its case. So why was Frank Piccolo killed? One theory, based on information from former Gambino underboss turned informant Sammy Gravano, is that the Genovese family had some problems with Piccolo. Allegedly, he had been trying to muscle in on some Genovese-controlled rackets in Connecticut. So, Genovese boss Gigante had reportedly appealed to then Gambino boss Paul Castellano, who subsequently gave his permission to the Genovese family to kill Piccolo. Authorities also threw in New England boss Raymond Patriarca into the mix at one point, alleging that he had quote-unquote ordered the murder because of territory disputes with Piccolo. Another theory reported by one newspaper was that Gambino bosses had ordered Frank to plead guilty in the Wayne Newton case and take the short prison stay he would likely get. Instead, he decided he wanted to fight it out in court, which the bosses back home in New York felt would have been a sensational trial that would have put the Gambino family under a glaring public spotlight, something they clearly did not want. According to the same report, Piccolo got wind of the murder contract on him and called his bosses, requesting an immediate sit-down to call it off. He was reportedly told to wait by a payphone the following day for a call about where and when the meeting would be held. Despite the many theories, the ultimate decision on Piccolo's fate lay in the hands of the Gambino family, and no matter the true reason, Piccolo was still a well-liked guy by many. He was only 60 years old. As a postscript, after Piccolo's murder, his former position as caporegime was awarded to a former close colleague and subordinate of his named Tommy DeBrizzi. Better known as the Enforcer, DeBrizzi was a strong-arm type thug who had been Piccolo's right-hand man for many years. DeBrizzi lasted as the new capo for 7 short years until he too was assassinated in 1988. He disappeared one evening while out on the town. His corpse was discovered a week later, frozen stiff inside the trunk of his automobile in the town of Trumbull. Next up was a Calabrian-born young hoodlum named Anthony Megale. He was a former Piccolo crew associate who had since been formally inducted into the Brigada and then quickly elevated within the ranks to capo status over the Connecticut regime. Subsequently, for a short time, he also allegedly became consigliere of the entire Gambino family. He eventually found himself buried under a series of federal and state indictments. Megale was later convicted and sent away for a lengthy term of incarceration. But as luck would have it, his jail sentence turned out to be the least of his problems, because just a few months after his eventual release from federal prison, he was dead from a heart attack. He had just turned 62 years old. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mob Fireside Chat. Thank you for watching. Until next time.